Turn up the dial, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wide variety. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Paranormal Spectrum here on the Untold Radio Network. Good morning, Lee. Good morning, Flat Rock, and good morning, Mayam. I think that's what it is. I tried to read that. So, hey, welcome to the show today. We are live, as you can tell, because we're starting late and technical difficulties and stuff. So definitely live. My guest has another technical difficulty, just popped back out again. So we will take it as it is and get things rolling here. So with that being said, let's get to it. We are Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society, my team. If you're looking to support us, you can head on over to wisconsincaps.com, click on Shop Our Store, and we got all kinds of t-shirts, mugs, hats, tote bags, you name it, even shorts and a fanny pack are on there now. But you can get it all, including our brand new ugly Christmas sweater design. You can get that on t-shirts and hoodies and tote bags and all kinds of stuff. It was all on sale still last I checked. You can get t-shirts starting at just $16. So head on over to Shop Our Store on our website, wisconsincaps.com, and pick yourself up a lovely holiday ugly sweatshirt. If you guys are interested, we have the Hairy Man of Dairyland, Wisconsin's Bigfoot documentary is available on our Patreon page. Head on over to patreon.com/Wisconsin Caps, and it is in the shop section on our Patreon. And you can show your support for all things we do here at Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. If you guys want to meet us in person, we are going to be at the Milwaukee Krampus event Sunday, December 7th. That is our last event this year coming up. And then next year, we are going to be at the Contact Modalities Expo May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in Delavan, Wisconsin. Big 3-day event there. And of course, Cryptids, Anomalies, and Paranormal Convention Saturday, May 9th in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Tickets for that event go on sale in January, as well as the updated full schedule of all of our speakers will be released as well. So looking forward to that. But guys, it is time for our awesome guests today. Let's get to it. All right, guys, our guest here today, David Phillips, is originally from Bristol. David spent 3 years at the Mountview Theatre School in London before arriving in, this is going to be one of those where you ask people to read things from Wisconsin. So, Paignton. After graduating in 1987 to perform in a summer season at the Palace Avenue Theatre. Having fallen in love with the wilds of Dartmoor and finding that the area had plenty to arouse his interest in paranormal activity, he stayed in Torbay and has immersed himself in all the myths and legends and spooky stories that the area has to offer. He has even set up his own paranormal investigation group, TIP, Torbay Investigators of the Paranormal, back in 1995, which holds regular meetings. During COVID, David left his box office manager's job at the Princess Theatre to set up his own tour guiding business, Moors and More Tours, to share his love for all things Dartmoor and the supernatural with anyone who wished to hire his services. Not only does it include tours in an 8-seater vehicle, but last year he added a series of ghost walks to his repertoire around various Dartmoor towns. He is also available for speaking at many clubs and groups and writes for the Torbay Weekly and Moorlander. He is a storyteller that can also be heard on Thursday mornings, featured on David Hammond's radio show, The Riviera FM. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, all the way from Dartmoor, UK, David Phillips.
Hello.
Hello.
Here we are on Dartmoor.
Welcome to the show, man. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure. Yes. Looking forward to this.
Well, we have been having a lovely chat before the show already, so I'm really excited to hear all about everything you got going on. What besides theater? I mean, like theater in itself. I don't think that I've walked into a theater that isn't got some haunted history or anything. Yeah. But what got you into all this stuff?
Well, this goes back. Oh, here we go. This goes back when I was younger. Let me have a quick fiddle.
It keeps freezing on him, so he'll be right back. That's the reason we started late here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Here we go. Right. Yeah. Well, my parents they got married in 1962. They came down to the southwest and to Dartmoor for a honeymoon, did a few trips over the moors, and then 9 months later, I was born. So I like to think that Dartmoor is in my DNA as a result of that. And then as I was growing up, I always had an interest in all things sort of, spooky, and I would get out the local ghost books. As soon as we went to a new place, I'd buy the local ghost book, get out my dad's map, and then put a ring round all the things mentioned in it. And then I'd say, this is where we're going for the next 2 weeks, guys. And I was quite lucky in that they humoured me. And we did get to see a lot of old spooky castles and houses in those formative years. So that's kind of where it started. And then I did exactly the same thing when I came down to Devon and found myself on the doorstep of Dartmoor again back in 1987. And one of the other places that was mentioned in the book that I bought was Bury Pomeroy Castle, which is allegedly one of the most haunted castles in England. But then a lot of places claim that. But anyway, it's got full of stories, and I've had a few odd experiences there. But it was a result of finding that on my doorstep and meeting some like-minded friends that we got together, and TIP was formed, the Torbay Investigators of the Paranormal. And I can honestly say since 95, up until COVID, because then everything changed then. But up until then, I'd been meeting with my friends and anybody that come and join us in a pub on a Monday night to talk spooky stuff. So, 95 till COVID, that's quite a big chunk of my life. So that's how immersed I've been into the subject. And now, since COVID and leaving my job at the theatre, I've now set up my business to try and share that knowledge and my interest in Dartmoor and folklore with anybody that wants to come along and either come in my 8-seater vehicle or come on a walk around Dartmoor town. So it's there. I just want to share the knowledge.
That's awesome. I feel like when we talk about the most haunted places in the US, it's always like the East Coast, because that is the oldest. It has the most history, right. New England up in there, and then down the coastline and stuff. And I think Europe and England and stuff have a lot more of this stuff because you have so much history. Yes. I feel like there's just everything is haunted. And I love that when you talk about over here, you talk like, oh, there's a haunted asylum or the haunted prisons and stuff. And you're like, oh, there's haunted castles. And that sets the bar right there to go, well, you guys got totally different stuff. I mean, a haunted castle, that's you have like, what do I want to say? Like, the storming of the castles and the battle, who owns the castle and all that stuff. And so you got to have a lot more history there. But
it's interesting because Barry Pomeroy Castle, that was basically a glorified home with battlements. There was no history of it being bombarded or besieged, even though stories are made up about it. But it's just a ruin now because it just fell apart. It was never finished. And then all the locals came along and used it as a building site. They would just take away a lot of the brickwork and the window frames and just use it in their own structures. And there's a good story. One of the main ghosts at Barry Pomeroy is the White Lady. You see her and supposedly it's a portent of death. So all that good, juicy stuff. But there's a building just up the road called Barton Pines. And the builder of that took some of the window frames and built it into his new structure. And the stories over the years that the White Lady's been seen there, coming back to claim her window frames. It all makes up a good story. Very cool. And that's what I'm in the business of being a storyteller. I like to find the juiciest bits to entertain people with, but I always like to look for the nugget of truth in any story, and that's what I go with. That's awesome. I love a good story. So I think like I said, I love UK, I love England and stuff, but I don't know a lot of the spooky stuff over there. So I'm going to let you kind of take it away and tell us, what are the more juicy stories? What excites you about there? Barry Pomeroy we just touched on, but the stories on Dartmoor, they're, again, as I said, they're like folklore, and they've been around for years. Back in the day when you used to have tin miners on the moors, back in the Middle Ages, and they would be dotted all over the wilderness, digging for tin or streaming it in the rivers, and you can imagine them sort of at night in their little sort of stone huts that they built for themselves, where they lived and they worked for long periods of time. You can just imagine them sitting around their little fire with their friends, entertaining each other with these stories. All the juicier, the better, really. And those stories have been passed down, and I'm now sort of picking up on the ones in the area that I'm studying, and it's just there for the taking and for the sharing. And one of my recent discoveries, or something I've named anyway, is what I like to call the witch's triangle, which are 3 points in a certain area of the moor, all with associations with witchcraft. And one of the more famous is a place known as Jay's Grave, which is a little grave with a headstone beside the road. not in a graveyard, because sadly she committed suicide. And this was in the days when suicides were allowed a Christian burial. And she's just dumped in a hole in the ground beside the road at a crossroads. You've got like a mainish road and a little track that goes across it, forming the crossroads. And the idea was that suicides were placed here so that their spirits wouldn't come back and haunt the living. So that's her story. And then when the landowner, hearing people saying, oh, the place is haunted, we're not going to go there at night, sort of thing, he went to find out for himself, and he dug a hole and he found the body of a young girl with child, because she committed suicide because she was pregnant out of wedlock. Again, another cardinal sin. And when he found the body, he reburied it with a mound and a headstone that's there today. And then this story came up that fresh flowers were always found on the grave. And there was a local storyteller or author called Mrs. Bray. And supposedly she was the one who came along and started this, myth by placing flowers on it. But supposedly if you go there at midnight and a mist will come down, and then when it rises, there'll be this fresh display of flowers there. No, been there many times, day and night, and no mist comes down and no flowers just magically appear. So it's locals or passing visitors that come and lay flowers there. But over the years, in the early days, it wasn't just flowers. I came across little figurines, and they were like, there was a Paddington Bear, Winnie the Pooh, Yogi Bear. So like figurines of bears. And then I think there was a Pluto, so that there was like dogs as well. So I don't believe they were left there for, the Kitty J or the child. That would be more like you'd leave a teddy bear or a doll maybe. But these are specific figurines. And when I did a bit of research, you come across the goddess Hecate, who's a goddess worshipped by witches and pagans, and her domain is the crossroads and the dead, and her familiars are dogs and bears. So I think these figurines were being specifically left to honor her, and were then being removed, taken back home, and then used in rituals, having been energized by the the lunar cycle. So that was my discovery there. And then if you travel one of the paths leading away from the grave, you come to a place called Hayne Down and Hayne Rocks. And in amongst that, you've got a solitary column of granite that's known as the Bowerman's Nose. It looks like it's got a big nose. And supposedly his story was that he was a local hunter and he upset a coven of witches one day. He rode his horse and took his hounds through their patch and spilled their cauldrons, etc. And so obviously they weren't best pleased, so they decided to get their revenge. So next time when they heard that the Bowerman was out and about on his horse, they hatched a plot whereby one of their sisters turned herself into a hare and allowed herself to be chased by him across the moor, and she led him back to this same spot amongst the rocks. And when he rode amongst them, the witches jumped out, cast a spell, turning him to stone, which is where he stands to this day. And his hounds escaped as far as a place now known as Houndtor, and that's where they were finally turned to stone. So you've got two areas of rocky outcrops all associated with witchcraft as well. So that's the base. And then the pinnacle, you can see from the grave, and it's a place called Easton Hill, quite a steep hill with, again, outcrops of rock on it. And there's, in Cornwall, you've got a place called the Boscastle Witchcraft Museum, which I've been to many, many times. And there's one exhibit that's a human skull strapped to a red pentagram on a tripod. And this is one of the exhibits. And when you read the blurb, it says it used to belong to a wise woman called Granny Mann. And she used to live in a place called North Bovey, which is just down the hill from this Easton Hill. And supposedly this skull was her friend. And every time people would come to her to ask for spell castings or rituals, she'd always say, "Oh, I've got to consult my friend." And back in those days, it wasn't good to have, paraphernalia of witchcraft, visible in your house. So this particular skull was kept up on the hill, hidden away, and she would go there to do her rituals. And when I read this, I thought, well, obviously the skull is in the museum, but maybe there's, a sign that, where her altar was or whatever, where she might have, done her deeds. So I went for a walk in the area, and sure enough, in the gorse line near the foot of the hill where there's a footpath, there is a nice outcrop with a canopy that juts out, and below it is like a little rocky shelf where you could imagine this skull and her candles spread out. And then underneath, there is a little sort of cubby hole where the skull could have been kept out of sight while she was, rather than taking it to and from home, that's where she kept it. And a friend of mine, I asked her if this could be the right spot. And she said, well, she'd also need a site of a rising full moon. And sure enough, from there, you look out towards Haytor, which is a rather famous outcrop on Dartmoor, and that's where the moon rises. And you've got a perfect view of that. And that's what I think is Granny Man's altar. And so that's my witch's triangle. And I'm quite happy to take people on walks to go and explore that part of the moor. So that's part of my repertoire, as it were. So, yeah.
We have a comment here. It says, I have seen the White Lady at Barry Palm Moor and saw flowers left at the crossroads in snow with no footprints.
Yes. That's a good friend of mine, Maya. She was the friend that I just referred to, giving me tips on witchcraft and stuff. Yes, her story is very interesting. Her first visit to the castle, there's a windy lane that you have to go down to get there. And as she approached the bottom, she could see up into one of the high windows, and she saw a figure in white. And her first thought was, what a silly outfit to wear walking around a dirty old castle. It was only when she got inside and saw there were no floors above that she realized that there couldn't be anybody standing up there. And then when she heard the stories, she realized that she'd seen the White Lady. As I said, is supposedly a portent of death. But as you can see, Maya's still very much alive as she's replying to our show.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So is there, in the US, we have the Salem witch trials, and I know that there is a lot more witch trials and even werewolf trials over in the UK. So is Dartmoor seems to be kind of really famous for witches, is it?
There is activity, but of course, Dartmoor is also famous for its antiquities. We've got stone circles and stone rows, and these were constructed by our ancestors that would have been pagan in origin, and that was their places of worship, so I believe. And so that sort of thought has been passed down through the ages, and today's witches and pagans still use these sites to worship on. And several years ago now, I was up there at the winter solstice, and I do a thing called letterboxing, which is, do you know geocaching?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, letterboxing is the original. It dates from the 1800s and was founded on Dartmoor and is very specifically Dartmoor based. Anyway, that's my hobby that gets me out and about and visiting the moors. But this particular evening, it was getting dark, and I was in an area called Belston, and there was an area there called Nine Maidens Stone Circle. And as I got close to it, I could see there were like lit torches, and I could hear dogs barking, and I could see there were people at the circle. And I thought, I'm obviously doing a winter solstice ritual. So I thought, well, I won't disturb them. I'll take another route and avoid them. And they left the circle at the same time, and we both reached the moor gate exactly the same moment, and it was a group of women wearing beautiful cloaks with moons and star symbols all over it. Obviously, been doing a winter solstice ritual, and we sort of hello, nice to see you, and they'd all park their cars next to me. So we had a little chat before they went off. So so definitely witches still do their thing up on Dartmoor. So and near in Exeter, which is where I live now, there's a place called Rougemont Castle, which had a courthouse in it, and there's a plaque on the wall saying this was where some witches were tried and found guilty and taken off to a place that's now known as Heavitree. The idea being they were hung from a tree that would have been heavy with the bodies of those that were executed there, and that is still a part of Exeter. So witches and trials, yes, they are big in the Devon area, but not so much from the ghosty point of view, but very much in the sort of psyche that they were here, and as I said, their rituals are still practiced to this day. So that's another part of Dartmoor that I can show people should they wish to come and visit.
Very cool. So it seems like you're very a lot of paganism still celebrated and worshipped over there. Yeah,
indeed. Cool. Yes. Yeah. And one of my other little pet subjects is a thing called the Devil's Door. Have you ever heard of that? No, it's mainly this is on churches. This is on old original churches, and the idea was that during the ritual of baptism, that the devil was exorcised from the great unwashed, and he would exit via the north door of a church. And so they all got a bit worried that he exited via that door. So could he come back in, or could he still be hanging around outside? So the door was kept locked until such days as they were having baptisms, in which case they were open wide to let him out, and then it was shut again. Now, when pagans were invited into the church, they actually enter their stone circles from the north, and they'll exit and enter through the north side of a circle. So when they're invited to come into the church by the Christians, the Catholics, they were allowed to use this north door, the Devil's Door. And the idea was that they would become Christian, but a lot of them didn't convert, and so Catholics sort of didn't really want them around. So when there was a decree made by the Protestants that this door was to be sealed up and never to be used again, to stop all this sort of Catholic superstition, and because the pagans have been allowed to use this door, I think they got tarred with the same brush, because it was known as the Devil's Door and they used it. Therefore, pagans, witches, what have you, were all then associated with the devil, and that was the start of their persecution, as it were. And now I'm being persecuted because it's frozen again. Hang on.
Yep. He'll be right back. There we go. Welcome back.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I've heard of like many Devil's Doors, like as far as like locations that are the doorways to hell or whatever. But I've never heard it about the churches. That's fascinating.
Yeah. It's only something that I found out recently in the Fortean Times magazine, and the person who wrote it suggested that this was anomaly mainly in the home counties or further north in the country. But I thought, well, if that was like a national decree, then surely all churches of that period would have been affected by it. So I've now made it my mission to go in search of the Devil's Door. And every time I go to a new church, I look on the north side and to see if there's this sealed up doorway. And it is quite obvious when it's there. You've still got the archway, but everything inside the archway has been bricked up, usually in the same stonework as the church itself. So obviously it became a thing back in the day when this decree was made. And it's a Facebook page called In Search of the Devil's Door. So I like to encourage people that come across one to take a picture and add it to my collection.
Awesome.
Interesting. It's on. You can Google it, Devil's Door, and the picture that you see first isn't a Devil's Door. I visited the church where the picture was taken, but that's actually the door to the bell tower, whereas the Devil's Door is actually on the north side. And they've even got floor plans. This is a place called Broadhempston Church, just off Dartmoor. There's a floor plan inside the church that actually labels the Devil's Door. And it's not the door in the picture of the church. But in this case, it's still opened. And apparently this part of England was very staunch Catholic. So when the Protestants decreed that these should be sealed up, they rebelled, and they kept theirs open. And it's still, whether it's still usable today, I don't know, but it's not been sealed up. And it's even, as I said, it's marked on their floor plan. So it is part of the recognized structure of the church. So it is a thing.
That's really cool. I wonder, I've never heard of that like here in the US, so I don't know if they brought it over from that, but
it would have been early Christian. Yeah. So that wouldn't have traveled because it wasn't a thing by the time. Obviously, it was still there on our churches, but it wasn't an idea that would have traveled well, I don't suppose, because it wasn't no longer necessary, because they'd all been bricked up. and you wouldn't take a bricked up door with you, so there you go.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I love that. That's a fascinating piece of history there. So,
yeah,
awesome. Do you also do investigating as well, don't you?
Yes, that's how it all started for me. Sorry, I'm just
not a problem.
making sure this is turned off because it
keeps chiming. Yeah.
That's better. Yeah. Hopefully that's done it. So that was back in 95. Some friends and I got together and formed TIP, as I said, and we did go off and do investigations in the early days. And myself and my two friends, Dave and Adrian, were very sort of, I'd say, cynical, skeptical, and so everything had to be filmed and documented. We weren't into gadgets. We're not that kind of group, but we do like to document what we find. And we did get invited to some really interesting places, and we even got hoaxed once. Somebody. This was our first real major investigation, and our equipment was set up, and we would lock the place up, go to the pub, come back and play back our tapes, and there were all these weird noises appearing, which we fell into the trap of thinking, well, these actually could be related to the haunting as we knew it. And then eventually we were told that somebody was hoaxing it for us. So that was a sort of steep learning curve. So after that, all our equipment was to be monitored every time we set it up. And so that's what we did. And then after many years, I started working with mediums. They were like my...
He'll be right back.
Here we go. And so then we were like sitting around in the dark, looking at our TV screens, whereas all the mediums were off interacting with the spirits of the properties we were in. And I thought, well, that sounds like a lot more fun than just sitting here watching our screens. So I started sort of following the mediums round and recording more of what they were getting. And we now work with a team of mediums, and thankfully to Maya, she was the one that helped train some of the girls in the group to use their skills that they were developing. And now they go around a property individually. They make notes of anything they pick up on, and then we come to debrief at the end of the night. And where they agree, then that's where there's obviously something worth researching and following up on. So that's how we operate now, and that gives us a lot more to share than just sitting in the dark looking at a TV screen.
I love
But it's, I go with, as long as we can research and then back up what the mediums come up with, then that's all part of what we do.
Very cool. Very cool. So where has been your most active or interesting locations that you've investigated?
Again, Berry Pomeroy keeps cropping up because there's quite a few stories there. We were one of the last group to be allowed access to it before the powers that be said, "Oh, there's no more ghosts here, nothing to see." And it's like, well, you can't deny that, the history books, there is a long history of hauntings here, but the Duke of Somerset, who owns it, and the English heritage that run it for him, they were trying to discourage that side of things. But unfortunately, there is a way in. But we won't go into that here. Not that we've used it, but people do. But as I said, we were last in to do a nighttime visit, and whilst I was walking down some steps onto a terrace overlooking the brook at the back of the building, I looked up at the wall and one of these old frames, and in the bottom left-hand corner there was this little light there. Whether it was a candle or whatever, I don't know, but it was there 1 second and gone the next. Either it'd been snuffed out or someone had shut a door on it. But obviously, knowing the interior of the building, there is no floors on that level for anybody to be standing there. So what that light was, don't know, but it was definitely there on that evening. So that's an anomaly. Then there's my own personal ghost sighting. This was a place called Sawley Tunnel, which is an old abandoned railway tunnel that got shut down back in the 60s, but it's on the land belonging to people that turned it into an adventure centre for kids, and it became Spooky World, and you could walk the half a mile long tunnel and back again, and it was quite spooky. So we were investigating that. Long story short, we came back on a second attempt with another group of investigators to have another go at it, thinking the place had been shut down and the owners would be new, but it was the same owners, and they remembered our visit and they were quite happy for us to come again. And the night we went, I walked into the hallway of their farmhouse because they let us come in and wait for our rest of our team to arrive. And as I looked into their front room, there was what first of all I thought was like a jumper had been left on the floor behind the sofa. And then when I looked, this little head came up and with floppy ears, and I could see it was a dog. And then a cat came running in, jumped over the dog onto the back of the sofa. And I thought, well, it's family pets, fair enough. Walked into their front room. And by this time, everybody else had gathered. And in front of the fireplace was this other big black Labrador. And everybody else was making a fuss of that. And after a while, I said to the owners, well, why aren't we making a fuss of your other dog? And they looked a bit sad. And they said, well, we did have another dog, but sadly, she died 10 days ago. And we've just buried her in the garden. So I said, well, what's this behind your sofa? And there was nothing there. And they then showed me a portrait of the dog. And that's what I'd seen, was their dog lying on the floor behind the sofa. And no one else had seen it, just me. So, that's my shaggy dog story, as it were.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very. He'll be right back. At least it's quick. Right back in. That's good internet over there. So even if it freezes, he pops back quick. So, and as I said that, now it's not. So, it happens. Lee says, it is really cool that mediums and psychics are taken as a real profession in the UK and not entertainers like here in the US.
Well, yeah. Funny you should say that. Because, if you heard of Derek Okora, Most Haunted, he was their medium of choice. And they encouraged him, shall we say, to make things look a bit more interesting. So he came up with his possession of the week. And after that, he got sacked But I believe he did have a gift, and he actually performed a couple of times at the theatre while I was working there, and I went to see him. And one night he was standing on stage, and he said, "Oh, I've got a grandfather figure here. I've got a Mr. Phillips, and where's David?" And it was like, "Oh, hello, Derek. I'm up here." And he then brought through my grandparents and gave me really good messages from them. So yeah, I do believe he had a gift, but he sold out for fame and fortune. And unfortunately, yes, we do have to label mediumship as an entertainment as the result of that. So yeah, we are tarred with the same brush, unfortunately, over here.
Do you have a lot of television series over there in the UK as far as like the paranormal and stuff? Or I assume you have some of the same stuff that we do here.
Yeah, we do. Yes, they're all available over here. So yeah, yes, there are. I tend to avoid it.
Yeah.
I do what I do, and if I don't agree with somebody else's methods of working, I'd rather not see what they do than tear my hair out. Because unfortunately, this Most Haunted program, they once did a live weekend broadcast, which they called Terror in Torbay, and they visited several haunted spots. They paid for people to leave their homes, so they could set up their equipment. So it was a bit of a shambles, and we actually watched them put this out live in what they call the Hub in one of our local leisure centres. And yeah, pantomime wasn't the word for it, but it was, yeah, it was quite amusing because they were there Friday to Monday. And on the Friday night, they went to a place called Lupton House, not far from where we used to have our meetings. And Derek was taken in there. They took him down into the basement area where the activity was supposed to take place. And he went into one of his, moments, and he said, "Oh, I've got the Pomeroy sisters here." And it was almost like their researcher jabbed him in the ribs and said, "Shut up, Derek, that's on Monday." Because sure enough, that's where they went on Monday, was to Bury Pomeroy Castle. And again, when they took Derek down into the dungeons where supposedly activity happens, and he said, "Oh, I've got the Pomeroy sisters here." And their skeptic said, "But you said that on Friday, Derek." "Did I? Oh, well, they're definitely here now." So yeah, that's what you get with Most Haunted.
Man, I don't know. I like the TV shows because it gets people interested in it and stuff.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
There's very few that I would say are worth anything. Everybody else, like I've worked with a couple shows and stuff, and unfortunately some of them have been good and bad, but for the most, they just try and sensationalize everything. There's so much rich history. I mean, especially over in the UK and stuff, that you don't need to sensationalize things. No. You can just tell the folklore, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you guys are very quick to go to the devil and demons and stuff like that. And I've got a demon in the works here tonight. Hang on.
Yep. We'll be right back after this message. I got to make little click messages for this stuff, the technical difficulty button. There we go.
Yes. Okay. So that's the reason why I don't like to sort of watch these sort of programs. But we started, as I said, back in '95. So this was before all these programs came along, and we would go to our local haunted houses and we'd knock on the door and we'd say, "Can we come in and have a look?" And they were quite happy to sort of welcome us in for free, because they wanted to find out what we were finding out just as much as we wanted to. So that was great in the early days. And then along came Most Haunted, put it all over the telly. And because they'd started throwing money at places to get access, we went back to some of these places. It was like, "Oh, well, that'll be £300-400 a night then, please, for the privilege." And that's kind of like, "Oh, no, thanks." So I kind of blame that for my, lack of interest in that side of things these days, because there's money involved, and yeah, not so much fun, really.
That seems to be what Ghost Adventures has done to a lot of the locations here in the US.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's, yeah, all you're really doing is sitting around in the dark, seeing if anything will happen. And to have to pay for the privilege of doing that, and no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got better things to spend my money on. But yeah, now, as I said, all that knowledge, experience is what I've put together, and that's now what I share with people that, you know, care to listen.
Absolutely. So we've done cryptids, anomalies in the Paranormal Society, my team, for about a little more than that, 5 or 6 years now. We started in 2019 as a professional team. Right. And in all that time, in all the investigations we've gotten called to, there's been 2 cases that I would say could possibly be either demonic or non-human spirits. So have you had any encounters with anything that you would consider actually a darker entity?
Once maybe, but I just say we now get called to people's houses quite a lot. And with the mediums going in with me, usually it's a household that is, you know, quite scared by something they can't explain. So we'll go in and the girls will wander around and make their notes. 9 times out of 10, we find that it's someone related to the people living in that house now. And when that's, you know, told to them, they're a lot happier to let it continue. You know, initially we're in there, they want us to ship it on and get rid of it. But when they realize it's someone they know, then they're a lot happier just to let it run its course. And these things do. Once the spirit has passed on its message via the mediums, they're happy. The household calms down a bit and it just sort of moves on all by itself. So we don't need to get involved. But there was one case that we did in Brixham, which is in Torbay, which is one of the places that I do one of my ghost walks around. And it was an old dairy. And some members of the group were living, this was their home, they lived there. And they were saying that every morning it's like something switches on in the building, making a noise. They can't find what it was. So they had that sort of waking them up. And then their daughters were being terrorized by some figure appearing in their rooms. And obviously we were there, you know, to try and help them out. And it's one of the few times where we did have to resort to trying to cleanse the place and move him on, because it turned out that he was an old farmer. Obviously the old dairy was his, and there were some old outbuildings still in a courtyard behind the house where our friends were living, and he was still lurking around there. And he was an abuser in life, and this is what he was still trying to do to, you know, our friends' young children. So he had to go, and it took 2 visits, and eventually we managed to get contact with his mother, and she came from spirit and took him away for us. So yeah, that was one of the few times that, you know, we've had to move it on. But again, that's not demonic. That's just a spirit that was spiteful in life and is obviously still like that in death. So yeah, they have to go. But no, when people come to me and they say, oh, something's evil, it's kind of like, well, maybe in your perception, because you can't understand something that's happening, straight away you're going to think it's something bad. It's meant to, you know, to harm you. It's there for you. But if you put yourself into the mind of the spirit that is no longer able to communicate, to touch, it can still see, it's aware of the living, but it can't interact. And just put yourself in that position, how frustrating that must be when you're desperate to get a message across and yet you can't. So you're going to start doing what you can do, and that's throw things around, turn lights on and off, interfere with electrical equipment, because you can, and that's all you can do. So if this suddenly starts happening in your house, then, oh God, it's evil, it's something out to get me, it's bad. But that's your interpretation. That's not the intention, because the spirit just wants communication. And so I believe that poltergeist, you know, it's still a form of spirit entity, just it's so frustrated that that's all it can do. It just needs someone to sort of tune in, communicate with it, find out what it wants, and then all will be well afterwards. And that's what I believe, as a group, that's what we now offer. So we're not just there to investigate, we're there to help and calm situations down. And it's an educational thing, I know science and the church don't necessarily agree with what we do, but we get results. I had an interesting conversation last year with the priest at one of the churches that I visit on my walk, and we met him. We had a chat. Turns out he's an exorcist. So that sort of got us talking about that. And at the same time, I had a group of my guests with me, so I was explaining what we did as a group, and he laughed and he said, and that's when I get called in. And I said, actually, other way round. You go in, and then it might clear briefly, but it doesn't solve the problem, because you're still left with a spirit entity that wants communication, and that isn't what the church offers. So we then get called in afterwards, and he didn't like that, and I haven't seen him since. So apologies if I did upset anybody talking about that sort of thing.
That is very well said. Yeah.
Interestingly, I tried to bring up the subject of the Devil's Door with him, and his response was, "There's a time and a place to talk about that, and this isn't it." So I've never met him since to talk about it, to find out his take. Another person that heard my story at a talk that I gave last year, he said that he used to be a choir boy in a church up the road from where I was giving my talk. And he said we were allowed to use the north door because it led you directly into where the vestry was, and that's where their choir boy vestments were kept. So they'd slip in the side door, get ready, and then take their place in the choir stalls until they had a new vicar. And the first thing that he did when he got his hands on the keys was to order this north door to be locked up and never to be used again. Now, he didn't explain himself, but that's what happened. And when eventually he left years later, when they tried to open that door, it was so rusted up that they couldn't, even if they wanted to. So why was he so adamant that the north door wasn't to be used? And the only people inconvenienced were the choir boys, because it meant that they then had to walk in through the main entrance to the church and walk up the aisle. And if they were late, they got spotted. So I don't think that's why the vicar did it, just to upset the choir boys. But that's it's a bit of a thing, and everybody's got a different sort of attitude towards it. So that's why I like to discuss it, particularly with clergymen.
That's absolutely fascinating. I would like to remind everyone listening that we are live. So if you are listening to this conversation right now as we're talking, if you have any questions for David Phillips, Dartmoor over in the UK, any of the paranormal activity or any legends or lore or folklore or anything that you have questions about, throw them in the comments section and we'll get them here before we wrap things up today. But I want to go back to, we talked about some paranormal and stuff. I want to go back to more of the folklore. We've kind of talked a little bit about the crossroads and the witches and stuff. Are crossroads a really big thing over there still?
Only if they've got a dead body buried next to it.
Really?
There are a couple of those. There's one called Stephen's Grave, which is higher up on the moor near a place called Peter Tavy. But in that instance, it's a crossroads tracks. It's not a road. It's in the middle. It's on the edge of the moor. And he committed suicide, and he was just putting a hole in the ground. And he's got like a granite pillar, a small pillar, just to denote he's there with the letter S on it. That's another oddity. But it's interesting because studying the idea of suicides, I've now uncovered like a social history of how they've been treated over the years. So there's those two that were putting a hole in the ground. There's another one, a place called Princetown, where Dartmoor prison is. In the graveyard there's a double family plot to the Kistall family. And the husband died quite young, leaving his wife to bring up 5 children. And shortly after he died, she got accused of stealing a pig from a neighbour's farm, something she vehemently denied. But she was taken to court for it and just, vilified for something that she said she didn't do. But anyway, even though she had 5 children to look after, she still felt compelled to take her own life. And in her case, because her husband had actually bought this double plot, she was allowed to be buried next to him. No funeral service as such, but just, put in the ground next to him. So that's a slight change in attitude. Another one I came across, excuse me, was in Ashburton, another Dartmoor town, and in an engine shed from the old railway line, there's a guy who now lives there, and he's turned it into a little sort of coffee shop called Bulliver's, and he lives in the bedroom above it, and he said he shares it with this ghost of a guy who hung himself. Now, he apparently was a town councillor. He was in charge of, quite a lot of public funds. And unfortunately for him, he got involved in a bit of a dodgy transaction. And again, he was vilified for his involvement in it. And again, he felt his only way out was to take his own life. So he hung himself from a rafter in the old engine shed, which is now this guy's bedroom. And in his case, he was allowed to have a funeral service. All his family and friends went along to the church, but he was kept in his coffin on the steps outside. So he couldn't be part of his own funeral service. When it finished, they then took him off. Presumably he was buried in the graveyard somewhere, but he wasn't allowed to be part of his service. And I've just talked about this last week to somebody, and the church that I just mentioned where we met the father, she actually went to a funeral service there for a friend of hers, and in the church, all the saints' statues were covered in sheets, as though they couldn't witness the funeral service of a suicide, which I thought, in this day and age, that's a bit weird. But I guess, it's still a thing to this day. There is a stigma attached to suicide. But it's interesting, the social history of it over the years that I've uncovered. So another little line of research that I've got that I share with whoever wishes to listen.
Can you go back and you mentioned that they were buried at the crossroads. Why was the suicides buried at the crossroads specifically?
Right. The idea was that the spirit of the suicide wasn't able to find its way back to haunt the living. It was to confuse them. Some versions even say they might have been staked through the heart, which, I'd hate to think that this happened to this poor young girl, Kitty J. But a bit like a vampire. The idea is to anchor the person to the grave. And interestingly, people always ask, is Kitty J's grave haunted? And apart from the witchcraft thing, and yes, I think it is, some members... Well, start at the beginning. A friend of ours was a psychic artist, and she was asked to spend the night in a cottage up the lane from Kitty J's grave. And while she was there, she drew 2 pictures. Here we go again. Sorry about this, folks.
Right. Again, if you guys have any questions, throw them in the comments section, and when he gets back, we'll get to them. But it looks like mostly just comments and stuff over there. So
all right. So they were in this cottage overnight, and she drew 2 pictures. One was an old woman, and one was an old-fashioned priest with a dog collar. And she said, one day I'll bring these pictures to one of your meetings and show everybody. So we didn't know when. It could have been any time. Anyway, 2 other friends from the group, they visited Hound Tor, and that was their special spiritual spot to go and energize. And one of them said to the other, I've never been to Jay's grave. So they said, let's put that right. Let's go there now. So they visited. And whilst they were there, they both had this blinding vision of an old woman holding on to the wrist of a young girl. And they took that as being Kitty J, being anchored to her gravesite and not being allowed to leave for whatever reason. So they did a little cleansing ritual. And they thought that they'd, achieved the goal of sending her on. But when they were driving home, again, they had this blinding vision of this girl still being held at the spot, so it didn't work. Anyway, they came to our meeting the next week, quite excited to share their little adventure, and it was the same day that Mary had decided to bring her drawings with her, and both women freaked out because the old woman that Mary had drawn was the same old woman that they'd both seen holding on to Kitty J at the gravesite. So yeah, definitely think there's something about that, and it is just a way to anchor the spirit at the grave site to stop it, going off and haunting the living. So very sad, but it was a thing back in the day. So you said you had some messages for us.
Interesting. Your friend says spirits of place are always harder to deal with than the spirits of friends and family, meaning like tied to a specific location, a spirit of a place?
Yeah. Yes. So again, this guy that I talked about in Brixham, that was his home. That was his patch. So yeah, he is the spirit of the place. So he's not been brought in visitation from anybody that's present. And that's why, like Mayor says, the friends and family are, easier to communicate with and to pass on messages from than someone that's adamant, I was a bugger in real life and I'm still a bugger in spirit now. So deal with me. And so, yeah, that's what you have to do sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's still not a demon. It's still not the devil.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. Like, I 100% agree with you. You put that very well and explained it as well, that, people that are buggers in life tend to be what people take as demons now. They're just a crotchety old person that, is causing trouble or having a problem. And yeah, like I said, very, very few things are actually demonic or other than a human spirit.
I think so. I mean, because, let's face it, the devil, was a Christian invention. Whether that makes him real or not, I don't know. But it's the idea that people are bad and evil. And it's, if you can just accept that as a concept without having to give it an image, then that's what people are. They're either, intentionally good or they're intentionally bad. There's no idea that they're, an offshoot of the devil or anything like that. It's just human nature. And as I said, a lot of the time it's not deliberate in spirit. It's just frustration that kicks in because they're no longer able to communicate as they were when they were alive. And again, this doesn't make them bad. It's just frustration and the wish to recommunicate or reconnect with their family from the other side. So yeah, I do believe that's definitely a thing. And that's what most people are intending to do. Just let me put another thing. When we do our investigations, I said we don't use gadgets or tools. Sometimes people might use a pendulum or whatever just to assist their gift, but we don't do seances and Ouija boards. My belief is that yes, some people think that there's something bad about them, but I think it's just the way that they're used. When you do a group exercise like a seance or a Ouija board, you're linking hands, you're joining energy. And we all, I believe, have got our own spirit guide. We've all got relatives in spirit. And when given the chance and when the energy is built up with that group session, then these spirits can come through. So in my mind, this isn't for the investigation room. Because you're there to look for the spirit of the place, whatever is haunting that site. You're not there to talk to your relatives just because you can. So that's why I don't involve that sort of thing in what we do. We're just there to look for whatever is upsetting the owners of the property now, or what might have been there in the past if we're there in an older building. There's obviously the time and the place for these sort of things to happen. And I know when people do these sort of paranormal events where they invite people to come along and take part in the investigation, you've got to give them something. Not everybody is as switched on or has we've all got the gift. I believe we're all born with it. It's just how you're brought up and how you use it, and you're encouraged to use it. But when you go along to one of these paid events, there's a transaction has to take place. People have paid their money, they need something to show for it. So if sitting them down and doing a seance or whatever is what you feel is worthy of their payment, then so be it. But at the end of the day, we're just there to look for what's in the place. And that, as I said, that's what we try and do. We bring people along to a property. We try and get them to tune into their own latent psychic ability, and then let them loose and just see what they can come up with. And if they agree with some of the other people that I've worked with, or when we've been there before, then that's when you're onto something, is that if there's a repetition of an experience. So that's what we're about. I mean, I'm not dissing people that do like to use the scientific equipment. That's all good, but this is how we work, and I know the results that we get are worth looking at, shall we say?
Absolutely. Lee does have a question here. She says, "What is the oldest spirit that you have come across?"
Got me thinking now. Well, this dog, as I said, that was only dead for 10 days. The spirits that, again, all roads lead back to Bray Pomeroy. Some of the oldest spirits would be there. I'm trying to think what else we've come across. And again, as I said, a lot of it is in people's houses. So it is, spirits of the recently departed. As I say, I'm not myself a medium. I just sort of mix with mediums, and doing that, it rubs off on me. So I'm more intuitive. So when people come to me with their problem, I can relate back to experiences I've been told, and see if we can sort of make it fit that way. So I guess the guy at the old dairy, he would have been quite old. The Black House is an interesting story. That's just up the road from there. There's a ghost there that dates back quite a way. And there was a woman called Miss Joyce who owned the property during the war. And everything that went wrong in the house, like lights were switched on, doors were locked. She was once locked out of her own home by her spirit. She'd blame it on this ghost. And unfortunately, during the war over here, I've just seen what Mayor said. Yeah, Coffin House. Obviously, during the war, there was a blackout, so all lights had to be switched off, curtains drawn across it. But the air raid wardens were often knocking on Miss Joyce's door to tell her to turn the light off. And she'd said, "Sorry, it's my ghost. It's not me." And I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly apologise to Miss Joyce. She's no longer with us. But unfortunately, during the war, because of this anomaly that always used to happen in her house, she was wrongly accused of being related to William Joyce, who was Lord Haw-Haw, the propagandist for the Germans during the Second World War. And I think locals must have thought that by leaving her light on in a house, she was doing her thing to help the German war effort. And I mistakenly went along with that idea, but I was recently told she wasn't related to Lord Haw-Haw, and it bugged her for all her life to think that these people were accusing her of being so, and maybe have had her own allegiance to the Germans, but that wasn't the case. So I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise. New information has come my way, and I don't wish to besmirch her name any further. That's not to say that she didn't live in a very haunted house. We were actually contacted by her dentist, no less. He came to one of our meetings to tell us his experience of visiting Miss Joyce at home when she once broke her dentures. And he was sitting in a kitchen making measurements and stuff to help her out. And all of a sudden there was an almighty crash from the floor above, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor on chains. And he couldn't get out of there quick enough. And he found a note at home the next day, handwritten note by Miss Joyce saying that, sorry for last night, that was my ghost playing up. So he went back to fit the dentures, but he refused to go in. He did it on her doorstep. And fortunately, he got it right first time, so he didn't need to set foot in the house again. I told this story on one of my walks earlier in the year, and this woman piped up and said, I heard those chains when I was 13. She said her and her friend were at school. They were doing a project. Presumably it was on the local ghost stories, and they wanted to interview Miss Joyce. And she invited them to her home, and she said, I'm not going to talk about my ghost, but I will tell you other things. So girls were a little bit disappointed. But as they sat there, all of a sudden there was this crash from the floor above and the sound of something being dragged across the floor on chains. So the girls were quite excited then, because they'd experienced the ghost firsthand, so they were able to write it up for their project a lot better than just asking Miss Joyce to tell them about it. And then another story that I got recently, I think this is one of the most haunted houses in Brixham, this black house. A friend of mine came on my walk and brought her sister along, and they both remembered being invited into Miss Joyce's house because she was a member of the same church as them. And they went to several dinner parties, afternoon teas with Miss Joyce. And the sister said, well, I've got a better story than that, because nothing happened during those afternoon teas. But this was Christmas time. And all the young children from the congregation were invited to go and visit all the elderly members in their homes, those ones that were a bit housebound and not able to come to the services. And they turned up at Black House. She said it was this beautiful hallway with a beautiful sort of staircase, a bit like Gone with the Wind, that sort of staircase. And the children sort of stood in the hallway to sing their carols. And the sister and her friend, they sneaked up the stairs to stand on the balcony to join in with the singing from on high. And they said when they went to sing while shepherds watched their flocks by night. And they thought it'd be a bit of a giggle if they changed it to the all-time favourite, while shepherds washed their socks by night. So they joined in using those words. And as soon as they uttered them, behind them, there was this row of old dining chairs on the balcony, and they started to move. And then one by one, they all fell over, and the girls couldn't get down the stairs quick enough. And they behaved themselves for the rest of the night, singing the proper songs, whilst Miss Joyce's ghost did its thing on the balcony above. So, yeah. Never been inside myself, but collected all those stories.
Lee, have you made contact with Joyce?
Yeah. Maybe. Again, she's not the ghost, she just lived in the house.
Is she passed now?
She has now, yes.
Well, see, then she could be a ghost now.
Well, she could be, yeah.
See?
But hopefully she's got better things to do than to hang around her old home.
She's just hanging out with the ghost of her house now.
Yeah. Hopefully, one day, I'll get a chance to go in and visit, and we'll find out. But at the moment, it's all been converted into flats, so I don't know anybody who lives there. But yeah, come and find me. Let me know, and I'm happy to come in and have a look.
Very cool, man. Well, we are past the top of the hour here. I don't want to keep you too much, but it's been absolutely amazing chatting with you. I love all your stories and stuff.
My pleasure.
You have the ghost tours. Do you run them year round? Where can people find information on them? How can they check them out?
Okay. Well, I've got a website, Moors and More Tours. I've got a Facebook page, Tip Files and Tipex Files, and Dartmoor Walks with the Storyteller, another Facebook page. But usually I have sort of set times of the year when I do the walks, but I can do them bespoke. So if people come to me, either individually with family or friends, then I'm happy to put something together on a mutually convenient time. I've got a few things already booked in for Christmas and New Year, so happy to do it whenever. I've got a couple of things lined up for Brixham for November and December when the Christmas lights are on, so that'll look quite pretty as well as spooky, and then more to come next year. So if people are in the area or want to come and visit Dartmoor, then look me up, and I'm happy to do business.
Do you do public investigations as well, or just like the history walking tours and stuff?
We do investigations when we get the opportunity. A friend of mine used to be the babysitter for investigations they do at Totnes Museum. That's quite a spooky place. We've done that a few times. And also last week I did a place called the Valiant Soldier as a special Halloween walk, and then we had a look around the haunted property. So I can combine walks with investigations. It's just a case of fitting it all in, you know. And I'm getting on now. I'm 62, so the idea of, although I'm a night bird, I like sitting up at night, but just concentrating on a TV screen doing investigations, it does tire you out. And many a time I've been found sleeping on the job by some of my colleagues. But hey, give me a property, give me people to come and join me, then I'm happy to go wherever.
Very cool, man. Both of those links are in the show notes, the Moors Tour and the Facebook group. You can check them out there in the show notes for anybody that's interested. Go ahead and click that on your chosen platform wherever you're watching or listening to us. So, awesome.
Very good. Thank you.
You're very welcome, man. Is there anything else? Any final thoughts that you'd like to leave everybody with?
Just keep an open mind is all I'd say. I know how I do things. I know it doesn't sit well with other people, but we all have to find our own path with this. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. Obviously, to try and prove anything to science, you need to keep it scientific. So gadgets, documenting everything you find, that's the way to go. But it does annoy this. The BBC, right? There's a guy called Danny Robbins who's got a show called Uncanny. He does a podcast, and they've done it on TV and on stage, but they don't have any truck with mediums. And I think the BBC have got a thing about this. We were once invited to not investigate, but to meet a local a celebrity called Sue Perkins. There was a program called Country File, which goes out on a weekly basis. She was just one of the presenters back in the day, and they thought it'd be a good giggle if they got the local Ghostbusters to come and join her when she was spending the night in the castle and tell her all the spooky stories. And while we were there, Maya was with me, and she was helping Sue to try and pick up the spirit of the place. And she was tuning in, and she was just getting it. And the director marched up to them and said, "Sorry, we don't want that in the program." And Sue was dragged away, and it didn't happen. So I think there's definitely a thing that mainstream TV don't want to feature mediumship. And like we were saying, Derek Okora didn't help that. The idea that it's just an entertainment has sort of blighted the whole industry, really. But it's there. It's a thing. People do pick up on spirit, whether you like it or not. And it is something that does need to be addressed and acknowledged, because it's how are we going to sort of learn what comes next? And that's kind of why I do this. It's the need to know what comes next when we die. And to have somebody that can communicate with spirit, that's only a positive thing in my book. And it's something that should be encouraged more and not just sort of brushed under the carpet. And back in the day, mediums were like put in asylums. It wasn't understood. Anybody that started seeing things or talking nonsense, as it was attributed to, was just put in an asylum. Yet they were probably mediums that were in tune. And this is back in the day, in Victorian times, when they were full on with seances and stuff. That was a big thing. But anybody that didn't sort of fit would have was brushed away. And that's how charlatans were encouraged, because people would pay them money just to hear what they had to say. So again, yes, there's a fine line. You do have to be careful, but when someone has the gift, it's to be encouraged. And we've had several young children in our group, rather their parents were in the group. They would tell us the things they got up to. And one girl was particularly switched on. She was telling people things that she shouldn't have known about. And one young lad, he had this imaginary friend called Elfie. And one day he was taken to a church in the East End of London where he'd never been before. They were driving through the area, and he said to his grandfather, "Oh, that's where Elfie lives." And Tony, his grandfather, said, "Well, we'll humour you. We'll take you into the church and see what you can find." And sure enough, they found the grave of a young boy called Alfie wearing a football strip that was said to be his favourite team. So this was, a young lad, who didn't know any different. He hadn't been taught this. He just knew where his friend Alfie was to be buried. And I think, as I said, we've all got this ability, and it's something to be nurtured, and hopefully more of it to come. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I have one follow-up on there. You kind of alluded to something that I'd like to go back to here. Do you think that you talked about like actual mediums were ridiculed and stuff and put into asylums and that, and how it's possible like the TV is downplaying all that? Do you think that some of the mediums or the people that are portrayed as that are purposely hoaxful to make a mockery of it?
No.
To kind of pretend that mediums aren't real? Does that make sense?
I see what you mean. Yes. So it's sort of, a ruse and something. Haha, I'm not real.
It's kind of pretend like they don't exist.
Well, there's someone I could mention. Darren Brown, for instance. He's got a gift, but he chooses to use it to downgrade mediumship. He said it's all mind tricks and stuff. So I've not got much time for him, unfortunately, because he is doing just that. He is going out of his way to try and undermine mediumship. And as I said, it's everybody has to make up their own mind about it. With Derek Okora, I said, he was used to make the show more interesting for the makers of Most Haunted. But this is awful, right? We saw them live on stage last year. It was just a greatest hits tour of Most Haunted video clips. Didn't really have much truck with it. Nothing featured Derek, yet he was the one that made their name. Okay. At the end, they did a Q&A session, and Carl Beattie, the producer, was asked about Derek. And he stood on that stage and he said, 3 things I'll tell you about Derek Okora. He was a fake. He died. He was a fake. He got fired. He died. And that's how he summed up the guy that helped make his name. And I just think that's disrespectful, to say the least. So those people that try and poo-poo it, and he was caught out. I don't know if you know the story, but they set him up by feeding him a name that was an anagram of Derek Faker. And when he used it in the program, they outed him, and that was when he got fired. So again, he was being manipulated all the way through it. I don't have much truck with people that do that. But to keep an open mind and just go with it. As I said, we were once hoaxed on one of our first investigations, but that wasn't through anything spiteful. That was just somebody who'd lost a loved one, and they felt that if we could bring some truth to her about ghosts and spirit, she might feel a stronger connection with her loved one. And by keeping us interested, by making these hoaxed noises, what have you, it did keep our interest. And that was the hope that we would then make some sort of contact maybe with their loved one. Some sort of hoaxing is malicious, and some is done with the best of intentions. But for us, it was like a bit of a learning curve, and we never left our equipment unattended after that. But as I said, I'm very, as I said, I'm not a medium myself. I fully respect, people that do it, and the people that I work with, they respect me, and they wouldn't dream of doing research into the places where I take them. I always tell them last minute, and they assure me they know nothing about where they're going. And I don't let them go around as a group. They go around individually, so they don't contaminate each other's thoughts, and they make notes. and then they refer to those notes when we do the debrief. So I know that we're as genuine as we can be. But it's down to each person's individual viewpoint on this. But I know where I stand, and happy to talk about it and to help people understand it as well. And with Maya, that's what we've done over the years. We've helped some of the girls in the group to develop, and they've now gone off and they do lots of investigations using this ability that they've honed. And I'd like to think that I've helped in my small way to set them on this path.
Absolutely. We have some amazing mediums on my team as well, and they're 100% legit. And they've, same as you said, we tell them, we're going to this city. That's all they know. Right. And then the day of, you get an address, you show up and go through, and one of the investigators will go with the medium, like you said, keep them separate. And then at the end, we kind of debrief and then figure out what we're going to do. So, and they've come up with some amazing things that there's no way they should know, and it all fits. And we go, all right,
we had a doozy. We did Ashburton last Halloween. I did one of my walks there for the first time, and we were then invited to investigate the old Exeter Inn, which is one of the oldest pubs in the world. And some friends of mine were mediums. They arrived on the evening to join in, but they hadn't been in the pub for very long, and they said, we've actually got a spirit that's trying to draw us away, that wants to take us on a walk. So they disappeared for a little while. They walked around the town. The spirit identified himself as Elijah, and he said that he was a taxman for the church back in the days when the church would produce their own ale. He would go around collecting the money from the people that had been delivered to around the town, and he took them on his route. He identified for them a tannery in an old ruined building, and as soon as he said that, they smelt the smell of a tannery. But what was really intriguing about this one, he took them to a house, a specific house, and he told them that he'd inadvertently killed a young boy on the doorstep of this house. And apparently he had a withered arm, and all the local kids used to take the mickey out of him. And this one day he'd had enough, and he just sort of struck out with his good arm, and the boy went falling to the floor and banged his head. And realizing that he'd probably done this little lad an injury, he ran off, just as the owner of the house came out and tried to help the little boy. But sadly, he died. And so our friends got this story from Elijah, brought it back to our debrief in the pub. And when they started to describe where they'd been, there was a woman there who was the PR for the pub. She'd set up the whole event. And when they described this house, she said, "That's my house. You're standing outside my house." And we had no idea where this woman lived. And she said, "Over the years I've lived there, their children would come running up the road from school or on the bikes, whatever. They'd take a tumble on my doorstep, and I would come out and help them up, just as this woman did when this little lad died." And she said, after she was told this story, it was almost like Elijah was making a confession to our guys. And she said, that tarmac in front of our house, that started to crack and crumble, revealing the slab that may have been there back in the day when Elijah was around. And that just happened then, with combining with Elijah's little confession. And so then it had to be re-tarmacked. That's one of the little walks that I do around Ashburton. But again, they didn't make that up. They had no idea where she lived. But a lot of the facts that they came up with through this guy in spirit fits and has some connection. So, 100%, mediumship all the way with me.
Very cool. Oh, yeah, very cool. I want to address this. Do you see Darren Brown's TV show in the US? And I gotta admit, I don't have much time for a lot of the television shows and stuff, so I have no idea what that is. I don't watch. There's like 2 paranormal cryptid shows that I watch, and that's it. Because they're all.
He's more of a mentalist. Very clever, but as soon as you start turning on people just to score points, then no, sorry, I don't have any truck with that sort of attitude to people. And yet he's got the gift. Yet he tries to play it down as though it's something you can explain, but you can't. And so it's almost like, he's afraid of being bullied or ridiculed, if he admitted that he had the gift. So instead he toes the line and goes out of his way to ridicule other mediums or people with the gifts. We don't go there.
All right, man. It's been awesome talking to you. I have one last question here for you, and then we'll wrap things up. Flat Rockland would like to know any thoughts on Patrick Jackson's work regarding ghosts as a UAP phenomenon.
I'm sorry, that name doesn't mean anything to me.
What are your thoughts on ghosts as a UAP phenomenon?
UAP? What?
Unidentified aerial phenomenon, basically the term of UFO.
Okay, right. I've got a specific view on UFOs. I believe these are craft from our future. Back in the day when UFOs were a big thing, you had abductions, all that sort of thing. A lot of the people that came back having had an abduction experience, they always came back with a story from the craft or whoever was on board it that we need to look after the planet.
Yep.
And I thought, well, why would someone from another planet, an alien, whatever, why would they give a monkeys about what we're doing to our own planet unless they're from our future? And so they're coming back to try and warn people to look after the planet. So that's my take on UFOs. Ghosts, I wouldn't have said there's anything spooky about a flying saucer myself, but that is their intention. I believe they are there to give us this message, protect the planet. Interesting UFO story then. Couple, but I go with this one again. Barry Pomeroy was involved. We were spending the night standing on the lawn in front, hoping the white lady or whoever would come out and surprise us. But I was looking in the other direction. We often did a bit of a sky watch while we were there. And as I looked up into the night sky, it split open. And through it, I could see daylight. And then all these little white objects started to sort of fly out of it, almost like a mothership was unloading satellites or whatever. And then it just zipped up again and all was dark. Very brief experience. I don't think anybody else saw it, but I did see that. So talk about, the puppet master, someone above pulling strings and, revealing things. That was a very weird phenomenon.
Do you think it was, when you say daylight, do you think it was light, like a door opened and light came out, or did you see like blue sky at night?
It was blue sky. Okay. It was bright daylight through the night sky. Nice. So what the hell that was, I don't know.
I've heard a couple stories like that. That's why I was wondering, because I've heard Linda Godfrey, who's an author here from Wisconsin, and she wrote about like the Beast of Bray Road, the Dogman entities and stuff. But she had a story in one of her books about a family or whatever, a witness that looked up at the sky and saw the turrets of a castle with flags in like a bubble or an opening like that. Okay. And then I've heard other stories of nighttime driving and then seeing daylight of a daytime sky and everything. So that's cool.
Yeah. It's we could talk all night.
We definitely could. I appreciate your time. We've gone about half hour over here, so I love it, man. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. And
my pleasure.
I'll definitely love to have you back again and talk.
Yeah. So. Do you want another UFO story before I go?
Absolutely.
well, we're on it. Okay, this was something that we saw weirdly. This was on the way to meet the people behind the investigation we were doing, the one that got hoaxed. So it's almost like paranormal stuff happens to you when you least expect it, when you're focused on something else and all of a sudden it blindsides you because it's not what you're expecting. But this was driving along a country lane, and all of a sudden we saw this little, almost like a balloon. It came floating out of the trees over the road in front of us. And as it turned, it was like hockey puck shape. So it's like flat, but balloon shaped on one side. And it went over the road, and we saw it going into the field, and we stopped the car to go and have a look. And we saw all these birds fly up in this field. So we thought, well, it's obviously landed. So let's go and check it out. So we drove up the lane a little bit further, turned left at the first opportunity, drove down this lane, and we came to what we found out was an abattoir. And we parked up next to that. And opposite the abattoir was this entrance to the field. And the gate was open.
What is that for people that aren't in the UK?
So abattoir is where you kill animals.
Okay. Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse. That's it. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So fortunately, none of that was going on at the time. But anyway, so we went through this gate. There was a little ankle-high electric fence. So we stepped over that and started looking around the field, but we couldn't find anything. But we'd all seen this shape go over the road and obviously landed in the field. And then time was getting on. We thought we'd better get to our appointment. We're going to be late otherwise. So step back over the fence, just crossing the road, and this silver Mercedes came speeding down the lane towards us, and without stopping, turned through that gate entrance and then just went careering off down the field. In the car was a man and a woman dressed in suits, dressed like Mulder and Scully. So they must have been watching us to know that that gate was open for them just to, spin right through it. But yeah, that was very weird. No idea what it was, but obviously I think they were obviously after it as well, and trying to retrieve it. Been back to that field several times since, but nothing else. But yeah, if we'd been any slower, then they would have hit us. So yeah, bit of a dodgy UFO experience there.
I wonder, we've heard all the stories of like cattle mutilations and abductions and stuff. I wonder if that was like a pickup stop or something.
Well, yeah, don't know. I don't know where the hell they were going, but it was a Mercedes. You don't take that off-roading. So yeah, very bizarre. Wow. Very bizarre.
Interesting.
Okay.
And on that wonderful note, that's a cool story, man. I appreciate it. So, yeah. All right. So for anybody listening, remind them again your websites and Facebook.
Moors and Mortors Dartmoor, and the Facebook is Tip Files and Tipex Files, and then the Dartmoor Walks with the Storyteller. God, so much stuff. But like I said, it's on your page there, so they can look it up.
Yep, it is.
Just Google Moors and Mortors, and you'll find me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being here, David.
My pleasure. Loved it. Thank you very much.
You take care, man.
And I'm notorious for going over time as well, so bear that in mind next time.
That is fine. All right, man. You take care. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much. And you. Bye-bye now.
All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Thank you all for tuning in, and make sure you head on over and check out Moors and More. That's MOOR and MORE for those, interested. It is in the show notes for anybody that's interested in clicking on that as well, and the Facebook link is there for you to check out. And make sure while you're online, go on over and check out all things Untold Radio Network. You can get shirts of the Paranormal Spectrum and Monsters on the Edge, both my shows, on the Untold Radio Network shops, so you can grab those while you're there. And like, subscribe, and share all things here on the Untold Radio Network and my group, Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. Until next time, guys, remember, we're all part of the Paranormal Spectrum. Take care, be well, and I'll see you next week.
You seem to know